Hello everyone, welcome back to the Anatomy Lab. Today we're going to be looking at some associated structures to the nervous system, or the brain rather, such as the meninges, the sinuses, and so on. So, first of all, to get us oriented, let's take a look at what we have here. So, although you can't really tell super well what this is, there's a few things that should help you to determine what is what. As in what type of tissue is this? What type of tissue do you think this is? So the more clear one that I would say is probably this. If you look closely, does this look like anything to you? This would be bone tissue. And this specifically is one of your skull bones or your cranial bones, meaning that this down here would be your brain. And then between the two, that is where you have your meninges, or your 3 meningeal layers. Now while we're at it though, let's take a look at what we have here. So this part, what part of the brain is this? So if you see these large cracks as well as these large grooves, or large ridges rather, this is going to be the sulci as well as the gyri, meaning that this is part of the cerebrum. So this would actually be the region between the 2 cerebral hemispheres. So this would be one of the cerebral hemispheres, this would be the cerebral hemisphere, and this would be something that's in between it. So let's take a look at what we have here. Now, one last thing before we go away from the brain is that because this is the cerebrum, remember that it has 2 major layers. So those 2 major layers are going to be composed of either gray matter or white matter. So this is something that we'll look at throughout the semester. You have a cortex layer and a medullary layer. This outer dark layer is called the cerebral cortex, while the internal deep layer, the white matter, is going to be called the cerebral medulla. So cortex is outside, medulla is inside. That is something that you'll see in a variety of different structures. So skull, cerebrum, cerebral cortex, and cerebral medulla. Now what that means is that these are the meningeal layers. So these have very distinct characteristics, and also you can orient them going from superficial to deep. So, well actually let's go from deep to superficial, because on the brain, that is where you're going to find this structure. This thin layer, this kind of peachish or kind of orangish layer, that is going to be called the pia mater. So you can see that it's all along the brain, covering it, even into the contours of all of the ridges. That's the pia mater, a very, very thin layer that is going to be directly surrounding the central nervous system. But a very unique structure that we have here next, it is going to include this up here, which is essentially the actual layer, but then it's going to have these little extensions that go downward towards the brain. So this is going to be named for what these look like. It kind of looks like a web down here. So if you know what arachnoid means, and if you have arachnophobia, you should probably be pretty familiar with this. This is called the arachnoid mater. So where you have pia mater, this is going to be arachnoid mater. And the arachnoid mater is named because it has this subarachnoid space composed of all of these different trabeculae, or all these little extensions that travel towards the central nervous system. So all of these little extensions, trabeculae of the arachnoid mater, within the subarachnoid space where you find cerebrospinal fluid, and then this part specifically would be the arachnoid mater. Now further superficially now, this is the dura mater. And the dura mater actually has 2 layers. It's going to have the periosteal layer, which is underneath the bone, and then it has the meningeal layer that is along the meninges, or more deep. And this can then provide for a couple of spaces that you're going to see that it composes or makes up, like this one right here. So given that this is the longitudinal fissure between the 2 cerebral hemispheres, what is this long space that's going along the cerebral hemispheres? So for that, you can actually see that a little bit better, although not completely separate. But that would be this long thing that goes all the way back, and then it's going to be carrying a certain fluid all the way back, and then down to the back of the skull, and then out to the sides, and then ultimately leading you back to normal blood circulation. So this is actually going to be what's called a sinus in this case. So for the nervous system, a sinus is a little bit different. So for skulls and bones, a sinus is going to be like an open cavity. But sinuses in the nervous system specifically will be carrying venous blood back from the central nervous system and then all the way back to your normal blood circulation. So these sinuses will include, or at least what you can see here, superior sagittal sinus, transverse sinus, sigmoid sinus, and then what you'll see is that the sigmoid sinus then leads to the jugular foramen. That is where it's going to then join into the jugular vein, which is then going to lead back to your heart. So this right here, what would this one be? Right along the superior edge of the skull, along the longitudinal fissure. This would be the superior sagittal sinus. So superior sagittal sinus carrying venous blood, which is going to be helping or going to be created partially by like these arachnoid villi that take the fluid portion from here, or some of the cerebrospinal fluid, and then redistribute it back into the blood flow using the sinuses. Now lastly, one more thing that you can actually see on this model, you think we saw it all, but there's even more. What is this? So once again, this is going down the longitudinal fissure. This is going to be composed of, or being made by, the dura mater. This is going to be then extending down deep between the two cerebral hemispheres. This is going to be the falx cerebri. So the falx cerebri, this is going to be kind of like a dividing structure between the two cerebral hemispheres made up of dura mater. So as you can see, there's a lot of things that you can look for. That's why you need to be careful and orient yourself to what you're looking at, like whether it's the skull or the brain, or like the part of the nervous system as well. So if you know that this is the cerebrum, longitudinal fissure, falx cerebri, superior sagittal sinus. So take a look at the models with a lot of care and a lot of detail. You can see a lot of different structures, like based off of what bones are there, what nerves are there, what they go to, and so on. So I think that's about it. Keep up the good work. Good luck with your studying, and I'll talk to you all soon.